So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. My name is Matt Rudolf. This is Greg Austic. My official title is the Executive Director of Piedmont Biofuels Co-op. Piedmont Biofuels is a fairly broad project, one of which is what we call the cooperative. And we'll talk a little bit about how it all, sort of define what that is and explain our project further along in the presentation. This presentation was actually Greg's idea. He's an economist by training, and so he's always looking at what works and what doesn't. So I snagged Greg about a year ago for the internship program, and he's since become involved really heavily in the daily operations of the co-op and has really helped me take it from sort of what's been described as flying right at treetop level to starting to just barely lift off the ground and see the light of day and start to think, well, this is a possibility. So I'm eternally grateful to Greg for all that he's done and really want to support him in this presentation. So Greg's going to start off. We're going to go back and forth a little bit. And yeah, do you want me to? Oh, did you want me to say anything else about what we talked about before?
No, let me start this first.
Yeah,
There's some quick things to start. I was just amazed hearing other people's projects and how many things were similar to our project. Just a quick list. Fuel making night, like at Hudson, same thing. We have Tuesday night fuel making. Just having other people have the goal of education be the main focus goal of their cooperative. We have that too. In fact, we see that almost as one of our flaws, in a sense. It's not a flaw in the goal, but it's a flaw in it being associated with the cooperative, potentially. $50 fee for members, that seems ubiquitous. Grease appreciation dinner. Right, once a month you go to a restaurant that you pick up grease from, sort of showing them, hey, like, we care. We call it a grease appreciation dinner. Using community spirit to help get work done. Yeah, we definitely take advantage of community spirit to get work done. Winter being devastating. Yeah. Google Docs. Love it. That was another one I was really surprised. I thought we were kind of by ourselves, and it was a year ago when I started like pushing people, hey, look at this, look, and now we use it for practically everything. It's awesome. Really like it a lot. And then just the importance of good people. A little quick list of things that I was surprised at how similar they were between ourselves. And then, yeah, if you wanted to go ahead and say.
Okay, I guess also just as an introduction to this talk, I wanted to mention that I think that there's been a lot of people that have said, like, Piedmont Biofuels are the only ones that made it work, or something like that, as if somehow like we knew something that everybody else didn't. And I guess what I've come to realize is we really didn't. We made a lot of mistakes, and really, if it weren't for a couple of things that really can't be replicated, things that put us in a really unique position, we would have failed just like many other biodiesel co-ops. But we just happen to have a couple of fortuitous things on our side that have kept us standing all the way up till now. And so as we go into this presentation talking about what works and what doesn't, I guess we want this to be, as we start to pull up from the treetops a little bit and start to really see how to make this work, when we, at our hearts, really are environmentalists and we're interested in the education outreach, but have to be economically sustainable, we're trying to take our lessons learned and all the mistakes that we've made that would have put anybody else under, but because of our situation didn't, and say, look, here's some ideas. We think that this could work. Here's what could be replicated. Here's what we think actually was just unique to us. And now let's take this piece and say, what makes sense and how do you make it work? And have a sustainable business all the way from the mindset of doing this for the right reasons, but also, not working yourself 80 hours a week to, scraping by, barely surviving, that kind of stuff. So we want this to be a conversation. We don't have all the answers. We just are going to draw on our experience over the past few years. And at the end, there's going to be a great panel discussion. And please chime in if you guys have other ideas about how to make it work.
So I'll get it started. Also, I want to say, when I talk about co-ops in here, I'm talking about legal co-ops. So there's been a lot of talk about co-ops, and some people don't have a legal structure. So most of the time, I'm talking about legal structure.
Why don't you make some background? I don't.
Oh. I was going to do that ahead of time, but I could do it now.
Yeah, background.
Okay. Yeah, we are. How much? I just don't know anything about you guys.
Sure, I can do that right now.
Yeah,
it's in the presentation. If you want to wait, it's a part of the presentation.
Yeah, that'd be great. Do that part of the presentation.
Yeah.
Well, first off, what is a cooperative? I was questioning whether or not to put this in here, but I thought it's just important to get this out of the way. So it's really just a form of business ownership Because this is a group of people who have joined together to perform a function more efficiently than each individual can do alone. And also, you'll find a lot of people that think they know what a cooperative is, but the fact is, a cooperative means a lot of different things in different states and in different countries. And so it's not really that simple to just say, oh, well, a cooperative is this, look in the dictionary. I think the biggest thing that connects cooperatives is members are usually directly involved in the inputs or outputs of the company. So usually members have some stake vested in the company which is greater than a typical shareholder or stockholder, right? In the case of a milk cooperative, they're the dairy producer, right? They're the ones selling the input. In the case of us, they are the finished fuel user, right? So it's something a little bit more than just a regular sort of corporation. And a lot of times cooperatives have sort of special rules, like one owner, one vote is common, though not everyone is like that, every cooperative. And it's usually governed by a board of directors, president, all that kind of stuff. So, and also there tends to be a general sense that cooperatives help cooperatives. They also help their community. They sort of have a series of values expected in them that other companies may not have. So that's just getting that out of the way. So some examples. Electricity cooperatives is one. So, you know, if you had 5 people in rural Utah and the local electricity company said, you know what, probably not worth pulling lines all the way out to you 5 guys. They might get together, form a cooperative, and pull their own lines. So what they're doing is they're filling a market niche that the market is unwilling or unable to provide. Milk cooperatives. So this is dairy farmers get together and make their own you know, cheese manufacturing location or something like that. It may be because there is one in the area and they're a monopoly and they're giving a terrible price, right? It may be that there is none in the area. But in any case, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take their product, take the value which is being added downstream and pull that back towards them. Marketing cooperatives, a good example is, you know, 5 guys grow cabbage and they have access to the local market, but they don't have enough cabbage to go to the capital, right, where they can get a much better price. Well, if they all put their cabbage together, then it makes sense to go to the capital and they all get a better price. So it's just aggregation of goods or aggregation of marketing can help you add value. And then food cooperatives, and this is totally on the other end. So food cooperatives, for example, an organic co-op in your town. It may have been formed because nobody else was selling organic food. So it was demand driven. And so they got together and determined that they were going to provide their own organic food and create their own grocery store. So it's kind of coming from the opposite side. But the point is, along this market chain, you can create a cooperative connecting different players for different reasons. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get across. So small-scale biodiesel cooperatives. Like, how does this fit in? Right? Like, why? So I guess that's what I'd like to talk about. So what are the kind of the right reasons? How did I change that? So what are the functions of a co-op? So these are roughly what I described in those examples. Acquire goods which the market is unable or unwilling to provide. So a good example of that is the electricity cooperative. Right? Market's not willing, not able to pull the lines out to you. To save money or increase your buying power, so that is the dairy cooperative. They're increasing their buying power and they're sort of pulling the rents down back towards them. Ensure a high quality service or product. That may be the case also of a dairy if there's a local cheese producer and they feel like the service that they are being provided is really low and really bad and it's a monopoly and they have no other choice because milk spoils if you go farther than a couple hundred miles. They might decide to do their own thing. Or there's certain legal advantages to cooperatives in certain situations. And that's certainly probably part of the reason why we chose a co-op, though there's legal advantages to other things as well, like clubs and associations in terms of fueling. That's the question there. So this is why you would start a co-op, and this is why a co-op would get started. Seem like the same, but they're not. This is the gas in the room, and this is the match that starts the flame, right? So one is ideology. I think a lot of people in here have that. You certainly do. They want to start a co-op versus an association versus a club because they like the idea of a co-op for ideological reasons. Charismatic leader. Obviously, everyone needs to have a leader, but sometimes it's the leader that makes things actually go forward. So that's another reason. Or an existing community structure. A good example is there's some folks in Canada, Everdale, a co-op up there, and we did some work with them, and they created a biodiesel co-op because they were already a co-op. I mean, they were sort of already set up that way. So it just made sense for them. So if you've got these, if you've got the match and you've got no gas, stop, right? If you're thinking about making a co-op and you have a charismatic leader, but you have none of this stuff, like, I don't care how charismatic he is, like, wait a second and think about it before you go making your co-op. You know, or if you're really ideological, you think co-op's the greatest thing in the world, but it's not going to save you any money. You already have B100 available in your area. You know, it's kind of like, just rethink it a little bit. And that's not to say it may make no sense at all. Like, there's maybe other reasons, but definitely rethink if you don't have those things, because there are other options, like nonprofits and associations and clubs, which may be easier. So, yeah, this is what I just went through. So sort of why a co-op in these cases. Most of the time you're not going to have this in the case of a co-op. So just talk real quick about the interest chain. So in the case of...
Excuse me, can I ask? I didn't see the P word anywhere in there, P being profit. And you mentioned nonprofits as another category. I think a lot of people, originally myself included, always were under the assumption profit meant nonprofit or not-for-profit, whatever that distinction may be. And there's a million different definitions, or a cooperative can be whatever you want it to be, essentially. But how do you or your organization address profit, if any,
right.
Redistribution or reinvestment?
That's a good question. For us, well, yeah, if any, is the first key point. If any, no, we really don't give, we certainly haven't ever given dividends, and I don't think there would be an expectation of giving dividends. That would be very unlikely.
Maybe just not profit, but enough money to pay yourselves. A lot of times people think of profit as money left over after paying the bills without taking their own time into consideration.
Right. Yeah, I think the first thing that would probably happen is our salaries would go up. Then the second, I mean, that's the honest truth, right? Like you at least keep people around by paying them enough to eventually have children.
Can I address that real quick?
Yeah.
If I could just address that real quick. So, first of all, our particular organization, we are a for-profit cooperative. We always have been since the very beginning. But we wish we were a nonprofit many times. You know, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, and that's kind of been this big learning curve for us. Is what's the...
Sorry, but do you find that a common misconception?
Yes.
People assume you shouldn't be able to make a profit?
Well, it depends. It's not that people think that we shouldn't be able to make a profit. I guess the common thread, the reason that we're really more of a nonprofit mentality is because we're mission-driven as opposed to profit-driven. That doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't make a profit, but that when we come to the crossroads of certain decisions, if we were just purely profit-driven, we might hang a right. But in this sense, you know, maybe we sort of walk a middle line and try to do a little bit of both because we have a mission statement that we have to uphold. So as far as that's concerned, there's no, you know, sometimes when we get grants, we wish we were a nonprofit so we wouldn't have to pay taxes on it, you know, if we ever do make a profit. But when the fact that we're a for-profit also has certain advantages that we can take advantage of in terms of how we do our revenue streams and how there's other advantages that we have. And that's part of what this presentation is about, is here's where we are and here's what we've learned.
I think the key answer to that question too is, I think it's silly to talk about distinctions between nonprofit and for-profit co-ops, because a co-op is defined by its mission. And a co-op's mission may be to make a profit, and a co-op's mission may be to lead the grassroots sustainability mission in North Carolina. And it's like, if that may involve making a profit in order to do that or to work towards that goal, then that's fine. But I mean, co-ops are just, they're mission-driven, whatever the mission is. I think that's my personal best explanation.
So when new customers are introduced to you, do you say we're a co-op, or do you say we're a co-op for profits?
We're a co-op.
Yeah, we're a co-op.
Okay.
And if they ask, are you for-profit, we say, yes, we're for-profit.
Okay, so if that question is asked, then you say we are for-profit, because as soon as somebody says we're a co-op, that's where people automatically assume
that it's a non-profit or not-for-profit. So that's
The difference.
distinction that I'm trying to make when you
don't have to.
define.
One difference is, we don't, so just to step back to the definition of a co-op, there is no owner. There is no person at the top of the chain that says, when we make a profit, I'm going to draw out a bunch and I'm, I'm going to sell the business and woo-hoo, I'm in good shape. There's nobody there because I'm just an owner. I'm actually a member of the co-op itself, even though I'm the ED. I'm also just one owner, one share, I get one vote. Same with Greg, same with Andy, same with Frankie, same with others in the room. We're all just equal owners. So yes, we're a for-profit, but nobody can make $1 million. It all the money goes back into the company to help it grow and to help it continue.
Actually, to be honest, it just depends, to be honest with you, because your cooperative can do whatever it wants to do to distribute the money that's left over.
That's exactly right.
It can decide if it wants to distribute based on
Exactly right.
biodiesel use. It can decide all those things.
Yep.
That's right.
When they say they're mission driven, that's what they determine is what gives their members maximum benefit.
I totally agree, and I understand the philosophy behind what you just said, but the reason there are some, for a better lack of terms, co-ops out there that are designed to make a profit and go the other direction when they present themselves. So that's why I addressed it.
But there's some nonprofits like that. If you look
I
at
understand,
Goodwill,
and that's why I'm asking the question, to make sure, that's all.
Yeah, and it's fine. I mean, the fact is the majority of co-ops in the United States are ag co-ops, and they're all for profit. And so it's funny that people don't realize that. People think of co-ops and they think of like Rainbow Groceries. It's like, no, that's actually, the vast majority of co-ops out there are like that, especially in terms of overall revenues. But
co-op, we have the
which minorities are.
same exact setup that you guys do at the Denver Biodiesel Co-op. We're mission driven. And we're organized as an LLC, but for tax purposes, we're organized as a 501c17. Okay, and that is, and we own as a profit-making co-op, we own that nonprofit. Okay, that's allowed under certain special rules. We had to spend about 6 months, dollars to get it done.
Yeah.
Because of all the legal work, but yes, you can do all kinds of things. And just because you have a for-profit, for instance, the biggest.
I'm gonna interrupt just for a second, and the comments are good and they're great. We need to go ahead and roll through the presentation before we keep going on this thread too much further and get away from our presentation.
I really want to hear that though. So when
I'm sorry to interrupt.
The biggest reason that we are a for-profit cooperative is because everybody in the oil industry doesn't understand a nonprofit.
Right.
That's the reason.
Well, and certainly if you go to try to get a loan, they don't understand co-ops at all. So it's really, really hard to get a loan as a co-op.
What you do with the profit in a co-op versus for-profit company.
It's just let's just leave it at it's just a different type of legal structure.
Yeah.
And it's a very broad thing, but we got to.
And it's a very open legal structure. I think that's probably. But I would like to hear more about that specific case.
Let's wait till the discussion, please.
Right. The interest chain. So in our world of waste restaurant oil, here it is, right? Restaurants are the one who are actually generating the initial value, right? Without them, you can have the greatest biodiesel processor in the world. Doesn't matter. So they started, then you've got the collectors, renderers, biodiesel processors, distributors, and end users. And this matters a lot, actually. That's why I put this up. There's a whole lot of restaurants, and there's not a whole lot of collectors. There's becoming more collectors, but there's certainly still a lot more restaurants than collectors. And there's even fewer renderers and processors. That matters because these folks have a lot more territorial control over their area than these folks do. And it also matters in that sort of interaction. Then there's very few biodiesel producers as well, few distributors, and then back into the end, there's a whole lot of end users. So let's just sort of look at a couple cooperative models and see how they sort of connect into this. So here's your distribution co-op, right? This is sort of what we started as, buying soy biodiesel from the Midwest and distributing it to our members. So the end users are the ones who are sort of dictating what the cooperative does, what the mission is. And they have said, I want biodiesel, therefore I'm going to make my own distributorship, and that's it. So this is as far as you get. And you're sort of losing money in rent along the rest of this chain to everybody else who's working. Now, you can sort of move yourself back and become a biodiesel processor and just buy the grease from your local Darling or Carolina Byproducts or whoever it is. It's a step up. That's a production co-op. This is where we are. So this is what we do. We collect, process, produce, distribute to the end users. They're still the ones dictating what the co-op's all about. But we've managed to sort of capture the rents from this whole chain and pull it up. And just to sort of throw this out there, and this is what I'd like to get out of this, what are other options? What about a restaurant co-op? 100 restaurants get together, and they decide, you know what? I'm going to pull these profits back towards me. And this actually, in many ways, is a much more traditional style of co-op. This is what a dairy co-op would be, right? These are the dairies. This is the cheese factory. And it's sort of doing the same thing because ultimately they're the originators of the value at the beginning. So they can pull that back to them. There's reasons why these don't necessarily exist, but it's an idea. So,
Carl's Jr.'s doing it.
are they? Well, McDonald's does it. There's a couple bigger guys that do it.
Well, chances are they're probably going to start forming. That's
and
kind
they
of
will.
our theory.
And here's the thing, McDonald's can do it because they're big and they may think about these things, but like 100 restaurants in downtown Chapel Hill or Carborough are going to have a hard time getting together and agreeing on this. So it's like, it kind of depends.
Yeah, corporate can dictate it.
Corporate can dictate it, that's exactly right. So the numbers, here's our numbers, and everybody's got their own numbers by the way. So take it easy, don't yell at me. I know, it's all different, but here's our numbers. We figure 80 cents to $1 per gallon of cleaned oil for collection. The collection sides, you really need a special person, special. Do a good job collecting. I was that special person, but it is kind of a hard role to fill. Production, between $1 and $1.50 a gallon is what we figure. We also get methanol by the tanker, so like you other folks, we have connections with a big biodiesel plant, also called Piedmont Biofuels, and we're lucky to get good prices on methanol. But methanol prices can go way up or down, so it depends. Distribution, this actually isn't us, this is industrial, the big plant, Piedmont Biofuels, the million-gallon-a-year plant, distributes for about this, but it really just depends on how much, but there's clearly a cost involved in distribution and a lot of labor and time.
Can you explain why we don't have a cost on distribution?
Yes, so
Just
we
briefly,
actually
okay.
don't distribute. So we sell directly from the location. It saves a lot of money and time and hassle, and even in just terms of above and beyond not having to drive a truck, if we change price, you just walk out the door. You know, if something happens, you're always there, so it's a lot easier. Yeah.
What about all those little stations I remember you guys having in the woods?
I'll talk about that in a second.
We'll get back to
I'm going to sort of hammer out the difference between us and industrial and sort of where there's overlap and where there's not.
Right. They're the ones who give us our methanol by the tanker. So, and then lab testing, which Matt will also talk a little bit more about. It depends on what you're doing, right? If you get a GC, it's one thing. If you're using safe tests, it's another. If you do 27.3, it's free or close to it. But clearly, there's a lab testing cost that we have. And then taxes for us, 55 cents a gallon, upkeep, amortization. So the point is, like, being cheap is not how to minimize costs. Setting your system up correctly is how to minimize costs. Being cheap, there's a nice proverb from a nice old proverb that says, "We're too poor to be cheap," and that's totally true. So what are the advantages? How can you set your system up so that you can minimize your costs without having to be cheap? So collection is the way to go. It's inherently local. Gas prices go up. Local collectors are better off. So you're not having to ship stuff all over the place. You do lose a little on the economies of scale, but you can be pretty darn close. Vertical integration, like I showed on that slide, if you're the collector, renderer, processor, and distributor, you're pretty well vertically integrated, which means you're sort of gaining all those rents, you're not losing any. It allows you to survive on a pretty small scale. It means you need to have really great help, but you can do it. Community help and involvement, certainly for us, has been huge. And this argument is on your side. So when you go out and talk to people, they're much more amenable to talking to you than other folks. And I'm sure you've all experienced that. You're also, on small scale collection, you're a lot more insulated commodity fats and oils. So you may not, we feel this because we're connected to the industrial plant and they're buying chicken fat in very large loads. But commodity fats and oils is not where you want to be because it's really expensive. So when you start buying tanker loads of soy and tanker loads of chicken fat, it will put you out of business faster than you can say, oh crap. So stick to small scale collection because you can talk to restaurants, you can have a personal relationship, and you can maintain reasonable prices that allow you to stay in business. And then there's legal advantages. I don't know why I put that there. Keep going. Disadvantages of small scale, you're spatially and market limited, right? If your market goes kaput in your area, you're in trouble. Can't really move that well. Labor is really expensive. We figure our labor is somewhere about 75 cents a gallon, which is a lot. You figure you've got one person producing fuel and you make 3,000 gallons a month, you pay them 2,000, I mean, that's a lot. So it's all about minimizing that labor cost on the small scale. Obviously, purchasing and selling is more expensive on the small scale. Everybody knows that. That's the case for every business. And you're also very capital limited, and I think that's a problem for everyone, is just that startup capital and doing it right the first time. It's really hard to find. So here's just some tips. Yeah?
Just a quick question, and if you'll address it later, let me know. But
Sure.
You guys said you have 1 share per member / owner.
Yes.
Have you considered capitalizing by having people own more shares and having effectively more of a say about things that they're invested in to try to raise capital for your co-op?
We haven't considered that. I don't think that's something that we really consider, but
Not at
Your
this
bylaws
stage.
support it. Because the bylaws are on the web, they support that. They support capital inversion kind of approach.
And I can understand, I mean, you sound like a very egalitarian and socially progressive and responsible organization, so I can understand the challenges by allowing people to invest more money and have more of a say about the affect of the organization, the scale that you're talking about. But for smaller burgeoning co-ops like myself and my partners, you know, that's something that's a very real strategy because we know the people who are involved. They happen to have the money, but they're also people that we know and feel really comfortable, you know, working with. So,
what is your goal as a co-op?
Basically, we're trying to secure local feedstock and prevent larger outside interests from coming in and taking oil from our smaller rural community down to a larger metropolitan area, and also to engage local independent biofuel producers in education and basically being a functional model.
Gotcha.
So we have very similar values and I think very similar aspirations, but because of our locale and the available feedstock, I think it sort of has us with some different opportunities.
I think one of the differences is if people view the co-op, which rightly they could, as an investment, you put in $1,000 and you have the potential to get $1,000 back out.
Yeah, we are thinking about dividends as a possible long-term return, but people they're not investing that as a money-making, they're really investing in my and my partner's ability to set something up that's functional. And it really comes down to love, you know, and just respecting each other, love and respect. But they're not in it to try to make a bunch of money. If they were, they would be expecting a lot more in their return and their upfront investment, but they really want to see something work and they want to see something long-lasting. So
Okay, well, I would say if people are looking at it as an investment, it makes sense that people would be able to invest in varying amounts, and with those varying amounts, have varying amounts of control. Because if you invest $1,000 and you're expecting a return, obviously you would like to have more control over what the company does. I think people invest in us because, one, they want to be able to buy B100, that's number one.
Yeah.
And two, they believe in the educational parts. And they just generally believe in what we do. I think that a lot of people, and say, when you talk to people on the phone, is that what you feel?
Well, our mission is to, one, lead the grassroots sustainability movement in North Carolina, and two, provide pure B100 in our local community.
Right.
And so I assume that when people support us, those are the two things that they are supporting. And we base our organization around those goals.
Just real quick, is there just nobody else selling B100 in the area?
There wasn't when we formed. We could put it that way. There was no other B100, in fact, in North Carolina at all, in the entire state of North Carolina, when we formed. And so we emerged as the place to get B100 in North Carolina. And that's why we formed.
I'm trying to think. There's other biodiesel producers. There's homebrewers, homebrewer groups.
And retailer. There's somebody who can actually go and fill up and buy B100 and instead of going
I
to?
don't think there are, no.
Only other groups that have spun out of us. So like
Okay,
Bull
Carolina
City, Carolina
Biofuels.
Biodiesel, other groups that are basically affiliates of our co-op that have spun out of it.
Right. But I guess my point is, if someone investing in our co-op for $1,000 they're not going to have the ability to have a bigger effect on the ideological sort of push that we're making more than somebody who invests $50.
How about $100,000?
That would be great. Send it, check it.
Let's keep going. We'll just give us a sec. Let's keep moving.
So, right, like I said, vertical integration is key. Certainly has been key for us, anyway. Distribute directly from your production location.
What do you mean by vertical integration?
I mean, do all of these things. Collection, production, distribution, and sales.
At the same time, or from the same location?
In the same cooperative.
In the same
In
organization.
the same organization, yep. Distribute directly from your production location, like we said, that it just saves so much time and hassle, and people will come out.
Can I make a comment about that?
Sure.
There's what I call the supply chain, you call the interest chain.
Sure.
In our state, what I find very frustrating is that some of our producers have started putting a pump in their own backyard. They're eroding the supply chain. So there are people like me who get on the phone all day with end users and retailers, and all these producers have to do is sell me one batch of fuel, and that takes care of 100 customers. But instead, they're saying, I can make that extra markup, and our supply chain is eroding. I mean, aren't you actually eroding the supply chain instead of supporting more local businesses to get the product out to more people, to support more end users who need that education that you don't have time for?
Well, I guess the key is how much do you produce? So in the case of our cooperative, we produce around, right now, we produce around 3,000 gallons a month. And that 3,000 gallons fills our tank, fills our homebrew members, which are sort of special folks who come in, help out, and get cheaper fuel as a result, fills our trucks. And on rare occasion, I think twice, we have sold some through other pieces of the trail, which Matt will explain a little bit later. So 5 miles down the road, sort of a thing.
And you're not trying to scale big.
Well,
Does industrial?
No, we're not trying to scale.
no,
up
we're
big,
not
big,
trying to
big.
scale big. No, we're trying to scale as much as we can collect. I mean, you can't scale any bigger than you can collect. And so if you collect 3,000, that's how much do you distribute. If we got to the point where we were collecting 12,000 and we were making 10,000 gallons of biodiesel, which by the way is never going to happen because our facility isn't that big. But if we did, then you would think about distribution and go through that model. If someone was already distributing and provided a reasonable price, then yeah, you think about that. In fact, that's what we did with Bull City. Bull City is in Durham. He has 2 locations that we've sold biodiesel to him for, I don't know how many years.
That's
3,
4 or 5 years.
Yeah. But in the case, it's confusing because there's industrial in the co-op, so they're sort of different things. The co-op produces 3,000 gallons a month, 2,000 gallons a month of biodiesel or so, and we distribute basically all from our location.
What does the industrial do for producing?
What's that?
What does the industrial do in terms of volume distribution?
3,800 a day.
Yeah, Link, you want to answer that question?
3,800 gallons of finished fuel a day is the industrial.
How about, I am going to do it like Piedmont Biofuels.
Right.
Here's who we are in just a second, so we're almost there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's so exciting! So anyway, there's another sort of, I think, useful thing. Build it right the first time and do your homework. We do a lot of consulting for people, and it's really frustrating to consult with someone, and then when you get off the phone, you know they're just going to do it wrong. And you're just like, oh my God. Jesus. Hopefully you don't have to see it. But just do that. See if you can get the capital up front, build it right the first time. And this is something else that Matt's going to talk about, but consider small-scale options for ASTM membership and testing for on-road sales. That's something that's really new. It's something that we are...
It's NVB membership. He always gets that wrong.
It's true, I do. But it's something that we do, and we're capable of doing. So it's something I hope other people look into as well.
So you're just talking about joining at the $2,500 level?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's
do
really
on-road
not that
sales.
hard, right?
And
And it would make a huge difference.
What's the point?
The point is you get 50 cents a gallon right now for WVO-based
I
biodiesel.
didn't hear what the point of it was.
They're just saying join the NVB so you can get the Alphabet testing so you can do on-road sales. It's
Oh, okay.
very simple.
Yeah, and by the way, starting July 1st, January 1st, it's $1 for
I
WVO.
don't think that's passed the Senate yet. It's still in the House.
That's the word. Well, was that the case?
It hasn't passed yet? Okay.
Okay, well, we'll see. But you think it'll pass?
No.
We'll see. It'd be pretty sweet. That's really the right thing to do. I mean, why WVO 50 cents and soy $1?
Yeah. Excuse me, I hate to belabor, but regarding the on-road sales, is there any, could you guys sell to the general public? Is there any reason why you couldn't sell to the general public other than violation of your
No.
bylaws?
We could sell to the general public as we are set up right
You're
now.
fully certified as any commercial producer from those regulatory compliance aspects.
Yeah, basically. I'll explain. Give me a chance to explain.
Yeah,
I don't know what's
on that, take that one.
Hey, next time, just watch it.
Yeah, give us first.
Yeah, sorry, I was sort of hoping to go through the theory, but a lot of questions come up. So, quality people, for us, the internship program's been great in trying to bring quality people in. David, myself, Tim. It's really key with the small scale stuff. If you don't have quality people, to be vertically integrated, you need somebody who can do 50 different things. And so people is everything. Every market's different, so it's impossible for you to just take a model and copy it everywhere. Make sure your model can survive with big price increases and decreases, because they're happening. With methanol, with oil, even collected oil. And if you're going to be a co-op, definitely make sure you've got dedicated members, because they do have to put in a lot of help and support. So I'll pass it on to Matt.
All right. So I'm just going to, I guess, it sounds like there's a lot of interest in who we are, so I'll just spend a few moments describing our organization and what we do and how we got to where we are. We got started about 6 years ago as a course taught at the community college that Andy was describing. At the time, it was just a continuing ed course. The two instructors plus the one student, Lyle Eskel, was in there. And afterwards, Lyle sort of bugged those professors, those instructors, and said, wouldn't it be nice if we actually made a little bit more than a mini batch? Couldn't we make just a little bit to go in my tractor? And so they started playing around behind Lyle's house. And of course, the story goes that after so much time, Tammy, Lyle's wife, said, out of here, boys. Go scurry along, find your own space. This is, I'm tired of having grease in my backyard. And they found another spot a couple doors down that had just been sitting there. And they started experimenting, and just like many of you have gone through, it was, started playing around. A bunch of different folks started reading up on the internet and experimenting, and we had lots of different folks coming out, and we happened to have some great folks, smart folks that helped push it along. And the internship actually started by accident. A guy who was up in Boone said, I'd like to come intern with you guys. I heard you're making biodiesel down there. And we said, well, we don't really have an internship program. And he said, that's fine, I'll just set up my tent. I just want to make biodiesel. And he said, all right, that's fine, come on down. So he just set up his tent and started making biodiesel. And they realized that interns were great. Okay? Interns, they make biodiesel and you don't have to pay them. And so the internship was born. And slowly over the years, we've been formalizing the internship. And it's turned into a really critical piece of our organization, because we bring in people from all over the place, and we sort of indoctrinate them to our mindset of how we do things, and they bring all different sets of skills and values, and they've helped push us along. And about 3 years ago, the original founding members, Lyle and Rachel, said, wouldn't it be great if we could quit our day jobs and do this for real and actually make biodiesel? And in fact, we started out, as I mentioned before, we started out as a distribution co-op. And we did some little backyard playing around, but that was more just like, playing around with a 55-gallon drum and in a little plastic, a poly tank. And but one of the early things that they noticed was there was no fuel available for those that didn't really want to get messy, just wanted to get some biodiesel. So they went and found a 500-gallon tank, christened it the Tammy tank in honor of Lyle's wife, for people like Tammy that wanted to roll up in their Sunday best and fill up on B100. And that was actually a critical step for us as well, because we started to gather a little bit of community support. People started coming out, oh, I hear you can get biodiesel down there. And so you get people buying TDIs, and at the time we were $3.50 a gallon for biodiesel. Diesel fuel was at like $1.60. So you sort of have this hardcore group of people that are in it for reasons other than financial. And that really gave us a bunch of core strength, having some folks that were buying diesel cars and getting involved. You get a core group of good people that are doing it because they want biodiesel. And in fact, just like Greg was mentioning, that was why we became a co-op, because there was this good was not available in our area, and so the idea was we form a co-op, and in fact we formed for a lot of ideological reasons. We didn't really know what we were doing, but it sounded like a good idealistic organization to be, and so we said we're a co-op, and amongst our co-op members you can all fill up on biodiesel, and we're the only place in the state of North Carolina you can. And at the same time there's this production piece going on, and our first intern sort of playing around, and we're formalizing that. And as these folks, these founders, move over to the industrial plant to start this industrial plant, their thinking is, we're bringing in all this biodiesel from out of state. We want biodiesel in our area, but wouldn't it be nice if it came from within North Carolina? Let's keep it local. And so, in fact, we're all doing jobs that we don't really want to do. We'd rather be in biodiesel. This is fun and exciting. And so the idea was, let's capitalize, let's form an LLC that's an industrial plant, let's do this as a commercial venture, and then supply fuel for all the co-op members. And so we set up this distribution trail, and the idea was, we have the Tammy tank, expand it. Let's set up another location in Pittsburgh, and another location in Chapel Hill, and another location in Raleigh. Little by little, we set up different distribution locations. And at the point at which the industrial plant came online, about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago now, somewhere around there, all of that fuel that had been coming in from out of state suddenly came from the sister biodiesel plant, which was the LLC, the industrial plant. And so we've been moving along, and the co-op has also been, at the time that they all moved over, they hired me to take over the co-op, and it was the first time there had ever been a full-time salary, you're just in charge of co-op. And so that was handed to me, and it was like, turn this into a real thing. Let's make this into a real sustaining business that runs alongside. And I didn't really know how to generate revenue. At the time, our revenues were on the order of $1,500 a month, and all of that was in like membership dues and a little bit of biodiesel sales. We got a little bit of margin, but it was all industrial. The industrial entity would buy the fuel, put it in the co-op's tank, sell it, it would all go to industrial, and they'd give us like a 20-cent per gallon margin to like funnel in to support the co-op. All membership dues, as that expanded, didn't matter where it was on the trail, even though that fuel wasn't made at the co-op, membership dues went in to support the co-op. And our mission was to provide B100 in our local area and to lead the grassroots sustainability movement in North Carolina, i.e. a very education and outreach mission. It was to go around and give workshops and talks and do this internship program and train people up and spread the good word, right? But that stuff just doesn't generate a lot of revenue. So you're sort of, immediately I'm like thrown into this, and we're in grant world. It's like, there's no revenue generator here. We're in the realm of grants. And that's okay, except for we're for-profit and still can work, but there's other things about it. And so, we're sitting there trying to define ourselves, right? And that's actually around this time I came out to this very conference in 2006. Sort of sat down and listened to all these different great talks and saw different people giving their case studies and thought, wow, now I'm starting to see who we are and what we could do. And it sort of, the foggy glasses started to clear a little bit, and I was trying to focus on what we should be doing. And one of the things that I realized early on is we should start to collect vegetable oils. We were having a lot of trouble with how do we get our feedstocks in. So I learned a lot about that. And we just started moving forward. And I guess we've slowly, with the help of the industrial plant backing us as a separate legal entity that at the same time works in tandem with us, and we support each other, we've moved forward, and we've gotten to this place where, like I mentioned before, we're just starting to lift off the treetops and be a real self-sustaining business that can pay a living for 2 or 3 and actually be a small business that works. And my 90-hour weeks have dropped down to 80 to 70. I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's really exciting. And that's kind of where we're here today. So going through what we actually do now, we do a lot of education, still a lot of education, workshops and demos, demonstrations. We're doing at least, I don't know, 30 or 40 on-the-road workshops. We have a mobile biodiesel trailer with an entire reactor system in it. It's a gorgeous system that we've put together, mostly through grant dollars and in association with the community college. That includes an oilseed press, a beautiful jacketed stainless steel reactor, wash-dry tanks, an ion exchange resin column, all fired by a cogeneration generator where we take advantage of both the heat and the electricity. Beautiful, gorgeous system that we then use, and we've got a full workshop that we do. And we go, I was just up at the northern tip of Maine, right on the border with Canada, and I've gone as far south as South Florida. And we go as west as about the Mississippi River. So we're all over the place giving workshops, we're doing like tours basically, trying to continue to give good, high quality education on biodiesel, educating people about the right ways to do things, and again, sort of lessons learned, specifically on biodiesel production, about what to do, what not to do, how do you deal with your side streams really, how does all of this really work, and try to be another source of good information. Specifically for farmers, by the way, so that's been an audience that we've targeted through a couple of grants from the USDA, so that's why the oilseed press.
So what do you do with these side streams?
With our side streams? At the co-op, our glycerin and our wash water both get stored and then brought to an industrial compost site, a large industrial site, where they then run it into huge compost piles. We're talking like football field size. That's what we do. We also do tours. So ever since the very beginning, we've been very, we call it open source, borrowed from the software industry. Sort of very, come and check us out, see what we're doing. We're playing around with this new technology here. Check it out. I'll show you what we got going on. And we still do that. So people arrive every Sunday at 1 o'clock. Free tours to the public. Doesn't matter who you are. You could be looking to build a biodiesel plant right next door, and that's okay. We're open to the public. Please come out and check us out, and that's an open invitation to everybody. We have the internship program, which is really sort of core and fundamental to the co-op, because it's where we do our sort of send out different people into the world. And we've got people now, we've got, one of our former interns is now an intern at the NBB, amazingly, who would have thought? And we've got former interns running biodiesel plants in Guatemala, and we've got former interns that have run commercial plants, and we've got interns all over the place, and it's also been a place for the industrial plant to hire. So a lot of interns have come through, and it's been sort of a way to train people up to then work at the industrial plant and think along the same lines, because we've got a different way of thinking about things oftentimes than people, new arrivals. Homebrew production. So one of the things that I did when I was early on in the ED is I realized that the reactor was like laying on its side when I walked in. It was sort of like, well, what's this? That thing doesn't work anymore. So, all right, let's ship that to the metal recycling and start fresh. And little by little, I sort of instituted a policy of, if nothing else, let's try and make one batch a week. And we've crawled forward from there. And it took us a couple of months to get there, and then we got to the one batch a week mark. And we kept it up for about a full year, slowly ramping up our other infrastructure, learning the ins and outs of biodiesel production. And then we went to a couple of batches a week and got it up to maybe 200 to 300 gallons a week. We do 125 to 135 gallons per batch. We have a large reactor, large by small scale standards. And we've now gotten to the point, just this, I guess in the past year, which is very exciting, that we've now gone to the on-road sales. We've got a new continuous flow reactor that we use in conjunction with our batch reactor that we figured out. And so we use our wash and dry tanks as basically as settling tanks along with our reactor. And so we'll run a batch through as part of our worker member stuff. So we have these worker members that still come out and participate and do work parties, help maintain the place, and still get to turn some valves. And the rest of the week we're running through some fuel that's then going to create value for the co-op. And again, sort of trying to scrape out a niche for ourselves that's revenue generating and self-sustaining. And we've had a kind of it's been a special circumstance. This wouldn't have necessarily worked everywhere because We had our sister industrial plant right down the road that could do our lab testing, that could tell us when we were off spec, that could tell us, we could do immediately feedback on, why did we miss on soap? Well, okay, let's try this. Test it again. You're still missed on soap. How do we do a soap titration? They had the analytical balance there. We could test on total glycerin. What works? What doesn't? Do we have to two-stage it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And worked it out till we were consistently, every single time, hitting ASTM spec, which we do every single time. We always hit ASTM spec on our batches now. And so that we got to that point where we said, now we're hitting spec. What do we do? Well, it's Piedmont Biofuels Industrial. Here's what we'll do. We'll figure out a trade where we say, you guys do all of our lab testing and certify this fuel, and it's basically that you guys are contracting with us, and we're the fuel producers, and this is your plant. And when we're making fuel, we're making fuel for the industrial plant, and we'll just distribute it, and you guys take the tax credit and all of that, and we sit here and we'll take the revenue that comes in from the sale. And it was sort of a partnership, sort of fuzzy, but it worked. And this happens, by the way, all the time in the biodiesel industry, where one organization has multiple biodiesel plants, and for instance, one NBB membership. And there's one lab that's making sure that all the plants are in line and making the good fuel. And so that's how we went into this space of on-road sales. Some hands are up.
So you're saying that you're leveraging industrial plants MBB membership for the health effects testing?
Yes, right now. And now we're moving towards our own, but that's correct.
Okay.
They've been tolling to us, basically. So it's basically setting up a tolling operation where we were tolling for them. And they're saying, you're make biodiesel, and here's your feedstocks, and here's the whole thing, and we're basically told.
Does anyone ask NBB if this is okay with them?
Yeah, we did. Because there's multiple biodiesel plants, and the structure is where you have one biodiesel membership, NBB membership, and then they operate various plants. It's actually been done many times.
I guess I understand what you're saying, except that you've got two legal entities. And so that's where I get a little confused. I understand they're both named the same thing until you get to LLC or cooperative.
Yep.
But I wouldn't think normally that you could do that. I can understand one entity with multiple plants.
Do you each have your own registration with the IRS and the EPA, your own activity letters, learning certificates, and things like that?
As far as registering with the IRS and all that kind of stuff, it's all through the industrial plant right now. It all just runs it's all industrial, and it's their plant that they're operating, and it's basically on this site.
They're doing a DBA is what it sounds like, not calling them funds of corporations, so they're fine.
It's basically, understood that it's kind of like this, understand that it is this fuzzy thing,
yeah.
But we did do some background research to make sure that this had done before, and we sort of made sure that we were covered, to the point that if somebody really wanted to come and check it out, well then we would deal with that when it came. But we sort of did some background research, and it seemed like we were okay, and we checked in and sort of, this is the deal. And it sort of was like, yeah.
Sort of correct to distill it down to say you have the co-op as a way for people to buy the fuel, but each of those co-op members don't have some equity stake in the industrial.
That's correct.
So
and that's created a lot of confusion. So that's been, there's been a lot of confusion about that because the members feel like they have a stake in the organization. And so if the industrial plant, for instance, is doing something different or not following the general mission of the co-op for whatever reason, we've had feedback from the members saying, why is what's going on? Why are you distributing chicken fat-based bio, for instance? We don't like chicken fat-based biodiesel. We're vegans, or something like that. That's been a source of eternal confusion. But that's why I give the history of how it all sort of formed, and now there's this messiness of this relationship between it. But because of the relationship that we've had, we're now starting to claw back and separate out and operate independently of one another, and are now considering our own NBB membership and doing our own, setting it up.
But right now what's happening is, in effect, you're selling your fuel, B100, to the industrial plant. They're doing the blending on site, so they're getting the blending credit, which really doesn't necessitate you having any sort of public that's testing, because in reality, they're saying that they've, I understand what's going on.
Did somebody else have a
I was
quick
gonna
question?
ask, maybe I'm a little confused as to why, if you're only working with members, if you're only distributing your selling product to your own members, why do you need AS10 testing certification, you need membership or anything else? If they're all used by your own members of the co-op.
It's a good question, but I think that it's still true that you have to be an NBB member and have the health data testing, I think. Because it's still there's still a business transaction going on. It's almost like you're a member of a club, but there's still a business transaction going on where somebody is buying a product and putting in their vehicles, and they need to know that that's a legal fuel, and especially if you're getting the tax credit.
Are they actually buying it though? Because it doesn't sound like they're buying it, they're contributing to the production.
Okay, so that's a difference, that's correct. At the home brewers level, so we do have members that come out and participate as worker members. And those members, if we were to just stay in that realm of things, we probably wouldn't need NBB membership. The reason that we're now going into this on-road thing and we need the cover of NBB membership is because there's on-road sales going out to people that aren't contributing with labor. It's almost like
People are using this fuel, it should be accredited.
That's where we're at. I'll take one more question, then I'm moving on.
Yeah, I can understand the fuzziness in your organization. You're in constant flux, and you're still changing. But someone brought a question up here earlier that brings up a problem. They're talking about different amounts for different investments, and that sounded a lot like a limited partnership to me. And because it sounds like a limited partnership, the IRS at any time could rule that it was a limited partnership, or something akin to that, or even a general partnership. You're better off defining it from the beginning, and you don't have the failure to file a 1065, you don't have the IRS restating everything, you don't have the IRS taxing your elements, you've got protections.
But we have no owner, so there's no, we have...
No, I'm not you. Someone else brought up the question. They were talking about one where different people were coming in and putting different amounts. And,
Sure, okay.
But that, when you have a structure you could use, you probably should, the IRS might be qualified.
Can we come back to it during discussion? I want to move forward a little bit. So I just want to look a little bit at our revenue so that people can be very open about what our revenue streams are right now. By the way, we've done just up through the first 6 months of the organization, we're at about $135,000 in total revenues, gross revenues. And here's the pie. Grant funds. So we're still heavily grant dependent. And most of that is for workshops. So that's the USDA has funded us to go around and give lots of these workshops all over the place. And that's very much keeping us afloat. We've got some workshop revenue that's actual where we charge for the workshops and give them like that. We've got some rents. We do some property management where it's actually sort of a community building venture where we've got different folks affiliated with the project, and an organization basically granted us for 3 years a series of houses and said, you guys maintain these. We want the grass cut and everything looking nice, and you can just have them for the next couple of years because we're not using them. And so that's been a huge boon to the co-op because we act as property managers and build community and have a place for interns and staff and other people affiliated with us to live, and it generates an income that's kept the co-op afloat. Another one of those irreplicable things. Membership dues, that's $50 a year. For us, it's $50 annual membership dues, and that's still a substantial, that's a really big revenue stream, especially because there's no real cost incurred in getting in membership dues, especially if you have some kind of auto renewal feature. It's eternally, it takes so much time to make all those phone calls. Once you get somebody on an auto renew, you say, what you do is you set up something where it emails them at the first of the month when they're up for renewal, says, hey, Frankie, you're up for renewal this month. Unless I hear otherwise, at the end of the month, your credit card will get charged. That has been a great little thing just to add some revenue in.
How many members do you guys have?
How many members? We have about 600 members right now.
Wow,
SVO sales, so a little bit, we've done some pass-through, some SVO that we've been collecting. That's been a little bit of a revenue stream for us. Biodiesel sales is all of the stuff that's gone through. So this chunk, as we've gotten more formalized, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're really excited about this chunk in particular because as we go for our own NBB membership, hopefully one day, and have our own lab testing that we can do in-house and move to a sustainable model that actually works, we won't be so dependent on grants, and we will know what our revenues are going to be from a month-to-month basis. And then when grants come in, it's kind of like, oh, we got this gift, we can grow faster and faster and faster. But that's really, we're trying to move more towards a sustainable business model.
Real quick, are you getting tax credits on SBO and biodiesel, and what are you selling them for right now? The co-op does not get any. The industrial takes the tax credit on biodiesel.
Yeah,
And what are you selling SBO and biodiesel for right now?
The biodiesel is sold for $5 a gallon, and the SVO is sold for, well, we don't really sell SVO, honestly. It's been a couple of like little things, and we don't actually sell SVO at the moment.
Where do you get sales for it?
I mean, there was, over the past 6 months, we've had a little bit, and it's been sort of, we had some excess, and so move it along to another biodiesel plant for, we negotiated something like $2 a gallon or something like that. But we don't have a form, at this moment, we don't formally sell SVO, so I can't give you the set price. It was kind of like, we've got 1,000 gallons, move it along, something like that, along those lines.
Do you have a full-time grant writer, or, 32% seems like tens of thousands, $100,000 in grant writing.
Well, so we got the total revenues are $135,000 for the year, which means that 33% was, basically we've got like $40,000 in grant money that came in.
Do you feel like you're able to get more money than it's taking you to fulfill the mission of the workshops and stuff?
It's close. It's very close. So we get $1,000 per workshop, and that's it. However, some of the grant money went into asset building. So that beautiful trailer I mentioned before, $20,000 went into building that. So we did acquire an asset, and then we're also spreading our name around, and we're hoping that coming into next year, we can really build on the education piece with this tremendous asset that we have. And if we don't get the grant, that's okay. The grant helped us get to having the educational trailer, and then we can start to charge a little bit more with more formalized professional workshops as we've been doing. Anything else that I missed? A little bit of consulting. That's like, somebody calls up and says, I want to make $1 million or whatever. And in certain cases, we'll charge.
Who's your workshop customer? What does that look like?
It's mostly farmers right now, or community college. Like a community college might bring us in and have us do a workshop for those community college folks. We haven't really gone into like Girl Mark's space, for instance. She's sort of got her own market of folks, and we're very different. It's a different group. It's mostly like straight farmers or community colleges, I would say. And educational facilities, universities, that kind of stuff.
Do you have a chart like this for profit?
For profit? No. Actually, I didn't put that together, although I should. That's
the reason I ask is, if you look at our chart, biodiesel sales is 90% of revenue, but it's 40% of profit.
Well, I do have expenditures, and I can say that total expenditures right now are about $115,000. So we're definitely far in the black. However, a good portion of that, take $20,000 and say that went into this asset of the trailer. So that means that actually on a cash basis, we're still scraping along the tree line there, just barely. But we did get a nice little asset out of that grant. So if you look at this, salaries and wages by far are biggest, as Bob Armentrout says. Wages are the gift that keep on giving, but in the other direction. So like equipment is cheap. $5,000 for some equipment, one-time cost, that's cheap. I'm $2,000 a month every single month, so is Greg. All of our staff make exactly the same, which is $2,000 a month and always have, including the industrial plant. We're all in the exact same pay schedule. Interns make, well, it varies, but the senior intern position is $800 a month, including housing. So that's where the salaries and wages, that big number. And by the way, that $2,000 is only a piece of it, right? Because there's all the other things, including health insurance and dealing with the paychecks that somebody doing the payroll service and all that kind of stuff. It adds up really quick. Fuel production expenses. So this is the KOH, the methanol, all of that stuff that goes into production, a little bit of overhead. Oh no, sorry, overhead is up here next to it. You put these together and you're sort of looking more at what is our actual fuel production.
Are your slides going to be available?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oil collection expenses. So as we've moved into oil collection more for real, those expenses have gone up. However, that's what's funding, or that's what's allowing all of this stuff to happen for real now. Because we actually have excess feedstock and have grown the plant to a point where we're producing 300, 400, 500 gallons per week, because we've invested so heavily in oil collection. And our feeling is that he who holds the feedstock holds the key to the universe right now. And so we are resourcing oil collection to as best as we know, as we can. And that's where, when Greg mentioned being capital limited is one of the big disadvantages. For instance, those grease dumpsters are $500 a pop. And that's really tough when you've got margins like this to pony up $2,000, $3,000 is the best we can do, when really we know that we should be throwing $20,000, $30,000 at it. I'm going to keep going, guys, just in the interest. I know you're dying. Okay.
It's really little.
Go ahead.
What are your major feedstock sources?
It's all used fryer oil from restaurants. You mean what kind of restaurants?
Well, I mean, you said you had several different locations. So are you collecting from one major city or from the various cities?
We're in a very rural area. I mean, very rural. But we're only 45 minutes away from urban areas.
Okay.
So we come out of our little hole in the woods and we hit Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, all of that. All around us is urban areas, but then we go back to the woods.
So it's 100% WVO?
It's 100% WVO that we collect. It's universities. When we look at oil collection, I'm going to come back to an oil collection slide. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, which parts can be replicated? Shoot, after getting through all that. Building a small-scale biodiesel plant that provides a living for two and biodiesel for your community. So I say a living for two because after scraping by and a living for one, it was really lonely. Seriously, like burnout lonely. And I realized after a while that I couldn't do it alone. Even with the interns, I love them, but they just come and go. And I needed some support. I needed somebody in there to help me. And when Greg came on as the second full-time staff, like I mentioned before, I was eternally grateful for the help and for the extra brain on things. I actually believe that part of a sustainable business is a living for two, not one. Oil collections. As long as, depending on your area, that is something that can be replicated. It's something that should be replicated because, as everybody now knows, feedstock is the key to this entire thing. So you really do need to lock that down. Side streams disposal at a compost facility. Somebody asked me what I do with our side streams. And we made that, from a very early time, we've been playing around with side streams. In fact, that was my presentation here 2 years ago, was on side streams. And we've been grappling with this, and we figured out that we never found the great solution. So the lowest common denominator, compost, but real compost, and take care of it appropriately. On-road sales, and then tethering to a commercial plant. We call it the satellite strategy. So you could call it a satellite, you could call it a franchise. That's what we're doing, and it's a way to take advantage of having that big biodiesel plant down the road that can give you methanol at wholesale prices, that can give you NBB coverage and can give you some lab support and can do all of that stuff that we couldn't do on our own to get to where we are now. We couldn't have done it without that industrial plant there. And if you can tether yourself to a biodiesel plant, find a common ground where they will work with you, that is something that we think gave us a great advantage. I'm going to come back. We're going to come back. We're going to do a discussion, but I got to move forward. Which parts cannot be replicated from our project? Well, the people and commitment to the project. That's probably the biggest one. We had some incredibly dedicated people that would not let this project die no matter what. Even if it was losing $1 million, it doesn't matter. This project will not die. And that's the start point. And so that kind of dedication where it doesn't matter, anything else does not matter, this will survive, something that you can't create that. You have to be in a special time and place, I think. A financial resiliency. Well, we have been backstopped by another rich entity, and we've incurred debt. So we are right now around $30,000 in cash debt, like actually unpaid bills, to our industrial plant that has given us and said, you know what, we know you guys are good for it. You know we're getting you off the ground, and we're slowly going from 10 to 11 to 12. Like, sorry guys, we're trying. And, anybody else would have called in that debt a long time ago. You can't replicate that. We also have, I call it gravitational pull and religious zeal. It kind of goes back to part one. Well, we've gotten, because of the project at large, which is the industrial plant, which is the co-op, which is a farming operation, which is renewable energy, all of this stuff, and the ability for, I guess, us to catalyze the movement and to be a part of that at the head of the movement and to generate all this positive energy, we've been able to pull down into our project some of the best talent and some of the best people that have really threw in all their resources to help us make this work. That's the gravitational pull. You get enough heavyweights in there and you've got a lot of mass. And in religious zeal, again, just like work, work, work to death, will not let this die. And our location, you either have it or you don't. We're in a rural area, but all around us was a really progressive area with lots of urban areas that we were able to go to and capitalize on all of that, the universities and the intellectual climate of our area. Oil collections is a thing that can be replicated. Here's our vac truck. We went out and we got a proper loan. One of the first times that we've done it right from the beginning, we feel like. So instead of like Band-Aid, putting it together with $500 here, $1,000 there, we went out, we got a $48,000 loan and bought a vacuum truck, and we now pay $700 a month on that loan, thereabouts, which is quite a bit of money, but we don't have a truck that breaks down on us. It works, usually. We did have a problem recently. We figured it out.
Gets back on the road quick.
It got back on the road quick. It is a very reliable vehicle. It works, the vacuum works, we suck all of the stuff off the bottom of the thing, everything works, we're slowly getting all of our barrels out, we're building up the grease collection business from the beginning, really the way we should have done our biodiesel plant had we known better. And so that's something that we really want to put out there as, it sounds like a lot of money. Well, hey, there's like a little $25,000 Isuzu sucker truck as well that's, honestly might be more appropriate size to a small scale little co-op plant. But you can do it. You can, if you figure out that because feedstocks have gotten so valuable, you can, if you figure out the rendering piece, and I know that that's state specific, there may be some real barriers in your state. Luckily, North Carolina doesn't have those yet, knocking on wood. We were able to get in as a small scale oil collection business and help use that to build up revenues to buttress the rest of the organization, the co-op. And we have resourced getting new oil contracts. It's been a huge priority for us because we've realized this is the lifeblood of the co-op. This is what will allow us to fulfill our mission in all those other ways because those aren't revenue generating. We have to have something that's revenue generating that we can grab onto that runs and keeps the whole thing moving so that we can get back down to a regular work schedule and actually start to turn this into something that works. And then I mentioned that getting containers and grease bins has been a barrier because we did not include that cost in our original budget for the truck. We just didn't, we didn't think that we would need $30,000 in grease bins. Don't make that mistake.
Have you looked at anything more cost besides per can? Like we use old propane tanks that cost $50 a piece. Pay $100 for a welded to turn them into collection containers.
Yeah, we have. We've talked a lot about different options.
I have two questions. Just one truck?
We just have one truck right now. That's
Okay,
right.
So, the one truck, how do you distribute your grease bins?
Right in the back of this truck has a gate that goes down where the porta potties used to go. And now the grease bins go on there. Or a pickup truck with a trailer.
Okay.
The grease bins, honestly, they're big and they look really, really heavy, but you get 3 or 4 people out there, you can lift it off and just place it.
You can do it with one person.
If you're strong. Greg can do it, but he lifts weights.
You can do it.
Methanol recovery is not optional is another thing that we are really emphasizing now. That here's a picture of a compost pile. That's where all our side streams go. All of the people that we talk to now, when we talk about biodiesel, we say, if you're setting up a small-scale sustainable biodiesel plant, incorporate methanol recovery from the very beginning. It's really important in today's climate in terms of environmental responsibility and what to do with your side streams in terms of staying legal. For many years, small-scale biodiesel producers viewed on-road sales as too difficult and too expensive. However, we're entering into this interesting space where we're actually seeing our sister industrial plant that we love so much is actually being too big. It's too big because it's tied to commodity pricing. And right now, chicken fat is at 48 cents a pound. 7.4 pounds per gallon, you do the math. You can't, it's off the charts, and it's really, really hard for them to make a profit, and they've had to make some decisions that we at the co-op wouldn't have made, but they've had to keep the project alive. And it's been this point where we realized that because we invested so much in oil collections, we were really insulated from this whole commodities pricing thing where the price of soybean oil, and therefore the price of all the other fats and oils, has left town and made it really hard to make money in commercial biodiesel. But those small-scale producers that can lock down local oil collection, they're in a real catbird seat. They really do have an advantage there. And you can do nothing more than sell feedstocks to other biodiesel plants, if that's what you needed to do. And then build your commercial, your production up from there. And that might be a way to look at it that might make a little bit more sense. Start with the feedstocks and then work up. Done correctly, it is possible for a small-scale producer to make on-spec fuel for sale. And then this, which I hear, I guess, isn't totally confirmed yet, but my understanding is that it's very likely will pass. And then, so, on-road sales demystified, what would it take? Well, NBB membership, and I know there's people here who would rather not be NBB members, but we're just sort of going by what it would take. Well, say it's $2,500 a year. It's a bit of money, but if you capitalize correctly and you really set yourself to the proper scale of maybe 25,000 gallons, that's not that much, 25,000 gallons a year, 2,000 gallons a month, to the 50,000 gallons, 50,000 gallons a year, that 2,000 to 4,000 gallon per month range is not that much, but I think you might be able to make it work and afford $2,500 a year. We're not talking about major capital here. It's basically my salary for 1 month. Lab testing. Well, legally, you really just need to get the full assay done one time. That's when you get EPA certification. That's the legal thing. Now, we would suggest you get it done quarterly. Get the full assay done quarterly just to make sure that you're not way out in terms of your specs. It costs about $1,000 to $1,500 depending on where you get it done. But again, it's not, if you budget for it correctly, you really incorporate it into your thinking and you set up the business model correctly, you may very well be able to afford a little bit of real lab testing just to back you up. In fact, our lab can do some of that testing, or the college can do very low-cost testing that Andy presented on earlier.
Excuse me,
yeah.
can I just clarify, the NBB is necessary for the environmental qualification and satisfy the EPA. The ASTM spec testing is in order to meet DOT or someone else's?
The ASTM, so to clarify, the EPA health data testing, which is required for alternative fuels to be sold, or we could just say for biodiesel to be sold, was done by the NBB. They own the rights to that data, and in order to get that, in that fuel that they're talking about that they own the rights to, is what the ASTM defines in D6751. So you need to say that I'm producing this thing that is D6751, the ASTM spec. You need to prove it to the EPA, and then you got to pay your membership dues to the NBB, and then they send a little letter over to the EPA and say, okay, these guys are good. We give them the right. Critical parameters need to be tested every batch with an in-house laboratory. So what we test. And I say that it's not difficult, but it is challenging. It's not impossible, I guess I should really say, but it is challenging to consistently produce on-spec fuel. We found it challenging, at least. Water and sediment. The different tests that these are the different tests that we do on almost every batch. I'll talk about a couple that we don't really do, but water and sediment we do on every single batch. And so the question is, well, you're going to actually pay $3,500 for the real ASTM centrifuge? You may not need to. You don't need to prove that you're doing it. But what you could do, I just saw this centrifuge on eBay for $25 to $75. And maybe you don't get the, the 100 mil centrifuge tubes. Those are very, very expensive, but maybe you get the 50 mil. Well, what we found is that when you fail on water and sediment, you really fail on water and sediment. There was something really in there. And you do fail in water and sediment, so it's an important test to do. So why not get the $50 centrifuge and get the 50 mil centrifuge tubes and run it through every batch? Because once you get the thing, you've got no cost on it. It's just the cost of turning it on and spinning it up and taking a look to see whether or not anything settled out. It's a quick and easy test that we think is actually a good standard practice to incorporate into your QC. Flashpoint. We only put this up if you're not doing water washing, and I don't have a good alternative to this. We are still incorporating a small amount of water washing. We do about 25 gallons of water for every 100 gallons of biodiesel that we produce. We do that, those of you that are techies, we do it in 5% washes, so we do 5% washes. So for 100 gallons, that would be 5 gallons, 5 gallons, 5 gallons, 5 gallons, 5 gallons. And we found that to be a very effective way to drop our soap numbers. And then it goes through an ion exchange resin column as a finished polish. So we don't do flashpoint, although we do have the capacity to check ourselves at the industrial lab if needed. We haven't found it to be a problem. Acid number, well, that's just a wet titration. That's just, you guys are already doing that. Just do the standard ASTM titration. It's really no different. You just use slightly different numbers in a scale. And you'll know your acid number for your finished fuel. You've got an ASTM test, and an important one, because especially with ion exchange, you may very well fail on occasion and have to figure something out. We've had to caustic strip before because we were over on acid. Cloud point, this one, I say a thermometer and a freezer. What is cloud point really? It's just knowing the cold weather properties of your fuel. So the suggestion is, if you don't want to get the cold soap filtration tester, that's okay. You really don't need that fancy thing. You could get a cup of fuel, you stick a thermometer, and you check it every 15 minutes, and you see at what temperature it starts to gel. If you really need to go down there, get dry ice. But it's something that you can do as a lab test that lets you know how is your fuel going to perform, especially in wintertime. Total and free glycerin, we do a 27.3 test on every batch right out of the reactor. So before it goes anywhere, we always make sure it passes 27.3. And one thing that we've correlated is that at refrigerator temperatures, so that's right around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the 27.3 actually does correlate very closely with 0.24% total glycerin. There's a strong correlation there, and it is somewhat temperature dependent. So we will pull off our sample, we run 27.3, and it goes into the refrigerator. And if it passes at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, we run it through the process, and off it goes to the lab to get safe tested, which the safe test is a alternative to the GC, much less expensive, costs about $7,200 on Utah Biodiesel Supply, and works great to give us our total glycerin numbers to make sure that that batch is hitting total glycerin, every single batch. Visual inspection, fuel should be clear and bright. Of course, that's just the test where you put that, what was it, like a $50 piece of paper on the other side of it, just to see if you can still see the lines correctly. You could also use a note card.
So fuel air. Clear and bright.
This is clear and bright, that's exactly right. And what is clear and bright? Well, it's making sure that there's no sediment in there, and especially that there's no moisture. Because there is no moisture spec right now in ASTM. That may very well change, but clear and bright is helping along that way. If you are way off on moisture, if you've got free water, you will miss on clear and bright. It will be obvious. Soap content, this one is not a ASTM spec, but we do it on every single batch. That's just a titration, nothing to be scared of there, guys. You're titrating with, I think it's 0.01 HCl and bromophenol as your indicator. It's really fairly easy. You do it on every single batch. And in fact, you should be doing it during your washes. Watch your soap numbers come down. Get a better feel for your wash process. Really not that hard either. Moisture content, right now, that's Carl Fisher for us. We're going to, as we set up our own lab in-house at the co-op and attack this, how do we do this all ourselves, we're going to be getting one of Utah Biodiesel Supply's little testing devices here that, I guess the way it works is, in goes the fuel, in goes a reagent, you close it up, it turns that water into some kind of a gas that creates a pressure that is then calibrated to your moisture content. We intend to calibrate, to cross-check that against Carl Fisher, and once we feel really good about that, we're going to use that in our in-house lab. So these are, I'm just saying that these are some tests. These are the critical parameters that we do, minus cloud point and flash point. Every single other one of these we do on every batch that comes off the co-op or industrial fuel, and these are not insurmountable. These are not insurmountable lab tests. That's all I've got. Any questions on my part? Okay.
Yeah, I think actually at this point, we'll probably just open it up to discussion. And I guess the point of this is really just to take some of the ideas that we presented and some of the ideas that have been presented by other folks with other co-ops and talk about were you to make a co-op today in one or another circumstance, what would you do? That's kind of my question. So what can work?
Why don't we take a short break so that people stretch?
Good idea.
Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute break because that was quite a long, very good presentation, but we're going to have